Have you achieved success and a high income, but still lack personal fulfillment and work-life balance? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Successful But Struggling podcast. Join us as Erin, Eunicia, Joanne, and Mim share transformative insights and practical strategies just for you. Discover real stories and lessons that will elevate your personal satisfaction, professional accomplishment, and financial empowerment.
Welcome back. I wanted to share that today, the day we're recording this, is World Mental Health Day. And you won't be listening to it on October 10th, but that's when we're recording it. And wanted to provide a trigger warning because we will be talking again in this episode about some mental health issues. And I am so grateful to be here with Dr. Joanne Sotelo. As you hopefully know, she is a psychiatrist and a coach. And both of us as physician coaches are so passionate about mental health and specifically how mental health is affected as a woman physician. And Joanne, I would love to hear from your perspective as a mental health provider, just more information about why is it so important to talk about mental health issues, especially for physicians.
Thank you, Erin. You guys know this is so near and dear to my heart. It is an opportunity for us to all think more about our mental health and anything that we can do for awareness and prevention. And I'm so glad that we can have the opportunities, not just in our podcast, but in terms of a day that I don't know that celebrate is the right word to say, but that we honor might be a better word to use. Because what we know, and these are the statistics for the World Health Organization, 1 in 8 people worldwide live with a mental health disorder. And that's actually diagnosis. We're not talking necessarily about symptoms or struggles. So that number is a lot higher than that. And you might be listening and recognize, yes, I've had times when I've been a little bit depressed, or I worry excessively, or I've struggled with my attention and concentration. So this is something that either you or someone you love have struggled with. And unfortunately, as we've talked about in this episode, this is not a topic that we openly talk about. It's a little bit easier to talk about heart health or even cancer. We don't always talk with that same openness about mental health, and we understand that this is our grounding, like our foundation. So much of what we do depends on our mental health, and we know that the numbers just keep on going up. And whenever there are studies that show in terms of statistics, the number of depression patients, or not patient people, right? Sorry for my medical lingo. With depression and anxiety, those numbers keep on going up. So this is not something that we can ignore. It's not something that we can just snap our fingers and make go away. We need to have that awareness, the acknowledgement, and also the education to talk about it and seek help if needed.
And one of the things we didn't bring up is that term stigma. And if there's too much of a stigma on something, it's really hard to talk about it. And if you can't talk about it, you can't change the awareness and then make change. And one of my hopes is that we can get to a place where not only is stigma taken away from the term mental health, but specifically for healthcare providers, specifically for physicians, where the stigma feels like it carries even more weight because of the work we do, because we're there to serve people. And if I do something to intervene with my mental health because I might be struggling for many good reasons, what will that look like to my colleagues, to my patients, to my family? Will I be seen as a failure or not able to perform? And that's really a double-edged sword for women and physicians in order to really get beyond the barriers that can be there for us to seek support and help for our mental health.
And Erin, thank you for bringing that up, because that's been, like I say in my dramatic self, since the last century, something that's been in my heart in terms of bringing more awareness and prevention because of the stigma. Because there are so many people who struggle and they do not seek help. And part of it's because of lack of access, and we can talk on and on about that. But a great deal of it is because of the stigma. And it's not just even external, it's internal as well, what we believe about it. Think about it. Like if you were struggling, would you feel like you have to keep it a secret to seek help or even talk about it out loud with a friend? So it's a huge thing. And I'm so glad that we're having the opportunity to talk about these topics. And that I want to also take a moment to kind of acknowledge the people who can talk about this out loud, whether it's been because they've struggled and they've chosen to share their stories. Because like we've said in this podcast, when one person shares their story in a vulnerable way, it gives permission to other people to do the same. And it doesn't need to be out loud, but sometimes just acknowledging it to ourselves. And that is the reason why we have these days when we take a pause to acknowledge the importance of these topics. And then we need to get rid of the stigma and take action. It's not just about the ideas or what we're thinking about, but what can we do? What are the actions to move forward and change that? Thank you for bringing it up, Erin.
Another piece of that is when somebody does talk about their own experience with mental health issues, then, as you said, whether you speak out loud yourself or not, if you relate to that, oftentimes I see this, maybe it's in a group coaching session or when I've hosted retreats with women in medicine, and they're like, oh, you too? I'm not in this alone. And there's that relief from feeling isolated or not feeling safe that, oh, I'm in a community, maybe a very small community of somebody who understands what I'm going through and can relate. And sometimes it can be difficult to create those circumstances where individuals, especially physicians, can feel safe in order to talk about those and not feel like there's repercussions or feel judged or, again, deal with the stigma involved. And we've alluded to some of this, but I wonder, Joanne, as a psychiatrist, as someone who's worked with women in medicine, women physicians, why is it so important, this issue of mental health, specifically for women in medicine, specifically for women physicians?
As women in medicine, we do so much. We juggle so many things. We have so many responsibilities professionally, and like you kind of call it the second shift, coming home and taking care of your household, whether you have a family or kids or not. There's still a lot of responsibilities there. And we have higher rates of depression, anxiety, substance abuse, burnout, and even suicide. And if you guys have not listened to our episode on physician suicide, please do so. It was very, very powerful. It's a good one to also share with anyone you know who can benefit from that information. And on top of that, we have the doctor programming, that we need to have things done a certain way, the perfectionism. We use busyness as a badge of honor, and we put all these expectations on ourselves and the belief that I should not struggle. Everyone around me is doing well. I should just work harder. I'm fine. Like we say, like I always say, fine is that four-letter word that starts with an F that get us in trouble. And what, like you said, it's the most beautiful thing when in group coaching, particularly with women in medicine, that like you can see it in their faces, exactly what you said, Erin, of, oh, wow, I thought I was the only one struggling with that. Because that's the other big thing we do. We suffer in silence. And that's part of the stigma. That's part of the beliefs. That's part of our doctor programming. And then we disconnect with ourselves and we disconnect with hope. And that is part of what we need to change.
And one of the things I wrote down here is the facade, showing up as if everything's okay, when I know there's people that I've worked with who every aspect of their life seemed to be falling apart, but they were showing up for their patients, showing up at work, holding it together with everything they had. And you may never have known what was going on, kind of like that duck on the surface of the water and their legs are paddling so hard underneath. Everything was a struggle, and yet they kept it hidden. And we talk about the exhaustion, the added exhaustion when you have to not only go through what you're struggling with, but put on a facade. I'm okay. I got this. I don't need any help. And not once breaking down and sharing that. And Joanne and I were talking before this episode started about something that I saw on a LinkedIn post this past week. And it was a male physician in his residency training. And he had the ultimate negative outcome and committed suicide. And in his note to the world, he basically said, I ran out of gas. And it just makes me think of how many women do I know? How many women physicians do I know that are chronically running on empty? And, are they at risk? Like this person was, for simply running out of gas and I have nothing left to give. It's just heartbreaking.
It's so sad. It makes me want to cry when you hear these stories, because it's one after the other. And that was one of the things that we shared in that episode, that about 400 physicians kill themselves a year. That's more than one physician a day. And so often it's part of
the U.S.
In the U.S. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So much it comes down to that of not the exhaustion and then the lack of hope. And that is one thing that Erin and I have it in our hearts. It's so important for us. That's why we're here and we talk about these topics, because even though you might not be able to control getting depressed or the circumstances, we can hold on to that hope. And I don't mean it in a minimizing way, never. But knowing that there are different things that we can do that can be helpful. And I always say, when you look at the numbers of depression and anxiety, I always say in physicians, I should have more physicians as patients. And I don't. And it's partly because of that shame, the guilt, the stigma. And that's part of why Erin and I are here, because we need to maximize every source of information, every source of help. And that's why we both love coaching physicians, because even though it doesn't substitute a need for a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist, it can promote health-seeking behaviors, and it can be a great source of mental and emotional well-being. And I went there on a little tangent because it fires up my heart knowing that there are people, again, suffering in silence, when there are things that can be done, at least to ameliorate a little bit of it.
And when you talk about hope and that question I have of what can we do? Because I do see physicians feeling stuck, losing hope, when I know we've got resources available for them through coaching, through mental health, through peer support, many different avenues. And yet, as you say, many times those resources go untouched. They go not tapped into. And I'm asking myself, what is it that is getting in the way? What are those barriers to getting hope? And also recognizing there's multiple avenues. It's not just seek help at, I was just on an executive committee meeting where we are on a program that provides free mental health resources for healthcare providers in our state. And, there's EAPs and, this program and, using your insurance and so many barriers. But as you say, we're still not seeing the numbers despite over 50% burnout rates in women physicians in primary care, over 60% burnout rates in emergency medicine. And yet where are those people who are going to best benefit from those resources, because they're oftentimes being untapped.
And like we almost always share here, the first step is awareness. And I can even say it from my standpoint and being vulnerable. I've been a psychiatrist for more than 20 years. I've personal development coaching for many years as well. And even though I do the work, I sometimes find myself feeling a little too stressed out, overwhelmed, kind of down, tired. And it takes me a moment to recognize it and be, wait a minute, where am I? What am I doing? What do I need? How am I feeling? And telling myself something's got to give. Just because you can, that doesn't mean that it serves you. You don't have to say yes to all the things. We've talked about that in here as well. So it's checking in, having that awareness, and sometimes just asking ourselves the question of, how am I feeling? How am I really feeling? Just that can create a great level of awareness, and it can create a pattern interrupt so that you can, again, say like, maybe I should add a pause here.
And you bring up a point too, where as physicians, we've been conditioned to have a very high tolerance rate for fatigue, for exhaustion, for workload. And we've shared on previous episodes that sometimes that resilience factor can work against us. And is it possible to raise our awareness sooner, not when we've reached our wit's end? What if we started raising our awareness 25, 50% earlier? What if we started asking for help or looking for offloading, delegating earlier? Could we stay out of that exhausted, overwhelmed state a higher percentage of the time and feel better, more joyful, more sustainable in our professions, instead of dealing with, I guess I just have to grind through because there's no other options.
I love that. And it's different for all of us. And this is work that I love doing with physicians when I'm coaching them. And I'm, again, in my dramatic self, and I'm very visual. Like I think of, like in a car, like the gas arrow, where it's like, okay, full, halfway, the light turns on, empty. And we need to recognize for ourselves what are the things that make us cross the line where we're closer to only having a quarter in our tank. And it can be different for all of us. So that's really good work to recognize what you're saying, Erin, of what are the things for me that alarm me to say like, maybe I should step back a little bit. Like I shared in one of our episodes, if I keep the door closed in my office day after day after day, to me, that's a red flag for myself. Like, I don't want to deal with people. I know that my tank is, below half. And so think about those things for you. What are some of those key things that tap into your awareness? I love what you said, before it becomes a problem. Now, the pain is always an alarm. Do not ignore it. That should be another point all by itself, because you said it correctly. It's a resiliency that goes against us because we stretch and we lose our sense of self in the process. So that's a really good one. And again, we can say so many things just from that point of awareness. A second thing that can come right after is setting the boundaries. Another thing that we bring all the time, and without repeating all the things that we said before, boundaries can be external, the things that we have to say no, the things that we have to say out loud to protect our time and our energy, but they're sometimes internal. That we don't always have to say them out loud. We can say, I should not say yes to every patient that shows up late. I should not say yes to all the committees that they invite me just because it feels good and it boosts my ego to be invited to lead something. I should not say yes to all the cookie making activities at the kids' school, right? So boundaries are difficult to set, but they are really important because, again, it's not say no just to say no. It's to protect your energy and your presence so that we don't have to hear what Erin shared of the doctor saying, I ran out of gas. We definitely have to be aware of that way before we run out of gas.
Yeah. So we talked about why this is so important on today, when we're recording this World Mental Health Day, that it's important because of the high suicide rates in physicians, particularly women's physicians, the high burnout rates, the high mental health issues. Why it's important specifically for women, Joanne, you talked about oftentimes we have this second shift where now we're done with our work day. Now we have more duties, household duties, childcare duties, and that what can we do about it? I loved your analogy in the gas tank about raising our awareness. Am I closer to quarter tank versus am I closer to 3/4 of a tank? And can we maybe recalibrate so that we build that awareness in, and so we are knowing when we're headed in that direction so we don't hit that point of I'm completely out of gas and I have nothing else to give. And then reaffirming the importance of boundary setting, and having been taught not to have boundaries in our medical training, and then yet recognizing the importance of learning to set boundaries, and in my opinion, then embracing the tool of boundary setting in order to get better outcomes. Is there something else that you would like to share with our listener, Joanne?
Yes, something that just came to mind is, in a lot of our clinics, and Erin, you probably know this even better as a pediatrician, that pain scale with the sad face and the happy face and the grinding face. Use it to check in with yourself. How am I feeling today? And it sounds funny, but it's really not, because we rarely pause for this. Even if you have to use that scale, like, I'm closer to the grouchy or sad, anxious side, or I'm like, I'm sort of neutral, and I'm like, I think I'm in a good mood. Just checking in with how you're feeling has been shown to improve our mental health. So even that is so important. But even better is if you see a pattern where you are regularly on the kind of sad, anxious, grouchy side, ask yourself, am I getting the support that I need? Do I need to talk with a colleague? Do I need to talk to a friend? Is it time to check in with my doctor? Do I want to talk to a coach? And reminding yourself that help is available. And like we always say here, you are not alone. And it's okay to not be okay. What's not okay is to suffer in silence. I got a little preachy there, but hopefully the message lands.
Yeah, I love that. And recognizing that, saying what you don't measure, you can't change. And so if you're measuring daily with that happy or grouchy face and looking for those patterns, that gives you some tools and resources in order to instrument some change. Love that. Love that. So powerful. And with that, we would love to see you at our next episode. And at the same time, I'm going to ask if you would do us a favor. And we are now at over 6,000 downloads. I love seeing that, knowing that we have an impact. And yet I also recognize there is so much more of an impact that we can make in the world if this message gets in front of more people. And I know from my own personal experience, rating a podcast is not super simple, but it's not too complicated. It's not rocket science. If you would do us a favor and pause before listening to the next episode and just go to the podcast show, then scroll down to the end of those first several episodes that are listed, and it should say to give the show a rating. Give us whatever stars you think. If you even want to give us more information, write a review. We read every one of them. We take it to heart, and we look forward to getting your feedback on this podcast. And we will see you in the next episode.
Don't miss out on more strategies that will elevate you to new heights. Visit successfulbutstruggling.com now, where you'll discover exclusive resources, and the opportunity to connect with each of us individually. There you can dive deeper into how you, too, can take your personal and professional game to the next level. And if you're serious about optimizing your results, take 2 quick steps now. Number 1, connect with us on the website. And number 2, tune in to the next episode.